Let's get into audience questions for the week. First question. Hey, David, isn't it time to end daylight savings time once and for all? This is an interesting question. We talk about it every year when we do the time change in the fall and then in the spring. One thing is that I'm going to address the question, but usually when people talk about should we end daylight savings time, very often they actually mean should we stay on daylight savings time all year round? In other words, let's not go back to standard time, back and forth. So this goes back to 1918, and the idea of daylight savings time to begin with was to conserve energy. The idea was if in the winter, when you wake up, it's dark, you're going to use more energy. It's going to be colder because the sun is not yet up at all. So you're going to use more heat, you're going to use more lights, so on and so forth. In reality, I believe that that ending daylight savings time causes more problems than it probably solves. So the energy savings, number one, are completely unproven. The light savings, when you consider that light bulbs, particularly as we switch to the more energy efficient ones, are not actually responsible for that much of all energy usage, can be outweighed by AC usage or using more heat when people are home and it is already darker out, for example, in some places. It really depends where you live because the United States has so many different climates. And then in addition to that, you do have to account for the number of car accidents that take place for two reasons. One is just the switch is a sort of jet lag. It's only an hour, but every time you move forward and back, you either have people staying up an extra hour on Saturday night because they know that they're getting that hour back for free, so to speak, to sleep. That can increase car accidents, lead to people having one more drink before driving home. And then in general, when you move driving at night, when you have more driving at night as a result of the fact that we're moving the clocks so that the sun comes up an hour earlier, but the sun sets an hour earlier, you do have more people driving home in the dark, and that would correlate with an increased number of car accidents. So all of the benefits that daylight savings times end is supposed to bring are questionable at best and possibly completely counterproductive in reality. So there are people who talk about cancel daylight savings time. I actually think what we want to cancel is the switching back and forth, and I would say let's make it permanent. Let's make daylight savings time permanent. The way to do it is probably going to come federally. So states, and some states do, opt out of changing time the way that most states do. I think part or all of Arizona, part or all of Indiana do this. And of course, individual states can do that. But I think really the way to do this is the federal government should just say, we're not going to move the clocks forward and back anymore. We are going to just stay. My preference would be on daylight savings time all the time. And then states and time zones would follow. There isn't one other idea, which is let's reduce the number of time zones. And since it's not really the question, I don't want to get into the details of how you might think, well, okay, that might make it easier so that there aren't as many hours separating the East Coast and the West Coast. But how does that relate to the question of the changing of the clocks and daylight savings time versus standard time? That's a story for another day, but that is another idea that people sometimes present. So I am an advocate of ending the time switching, but I don't want to end daylight savings time. I want to make daylight savings time permanent. I really don't care if when I get up in the morning, it's still sort of dark or, depending on what time you get out, completely dark. I would love that extra hour of sunlight. And I would actually argue that the health benefits of that, people are way more likely to go to the gym after work or to do something social after work if it's not pitch black at 4:45 in the middle of December in Massachusetts. And so I think that that's the direction we should go.